Modern Russia is defined by its immense scale and a narrative of resilience forged through hardship. But this human-centric view barely scratches the surface of the region's historical volatility. To find the ultimate test of survival, we must rewind 250 million years to the Lopingian stage of the Permian period, from 259 to 251 million years ago. At this time, the future nation was fractured into two distinct landmasses, the isolated Siberian continent and the European Russian territory, separated by a shallow sea. This was a pre-unification Russia, defined not by politics but by brutal geology. The strategic metric for this era was not conquest, but endurance. Extreme geographic isolation, combined with a uniquely unstable climate, created a high-pressure ecosystem unlike any other on the supercontinent of Pangaea. This environment acted as a crucible, concentrating biological risk and setting the stage for a systemic collapse. It was not just the most dangerous period in Russian history, it was a planetary-scale experiment in lethality, where the rules of life were about to be rewritten by fire. This analysis is not about monsters, but about the system that made them necessary and the geology that made them obsolete. The isolation of Permian Russia was not a matter of choice, it was a geographic sentence, enforced by continental-scale geology that dictated the terms of survival for every organism caught inside. Any creature dropped into this territory was effectively trapped, with escape routes systematically sealed off by two immense mountain ranges and a shallow, impassable sea separating the Siberian and European landmasses. The first barrier was regional. The Ural Mountains, which still divide Europe from Asia today, function as a critical wall. This range obstructed westward migration for Siberian fauna and, more importantly, blocked moisture-laden air from the west. This cast a dry shadow over Siberia, initiating a process of habitat fragmentation that made resources increasingly scarce. This initial barrier ensured that life east of the Urals was already operating under extreme environmental stress, a system designed to filter out all but the most resilient organisms. However, the true dead end lay further west. Even if an organism could bypass the Urals, it would immediately confront a far more formidable obstacle, the central Pangaean Mountains. This was one of the largest mountain ranges in Earth's history, stretching across the supercontinent's equator. With peaks rivaling the modern Himalayas in height but a length vastly greater, this super-range effectively sliced Pangaea in two. Its remnants are now scattered across the globe as separate formations, including North America's Appalachians and Africa's Atlas Mountains, a testament to its colossal scale. This planetary barrier did more than just block movement, it weaponized the climate. The range created a massive rain shadow that starved the northern hemisphere of moisture, turning the continental interior into an expanse of hyper-arid deserts. For life in Permian Russia, this geography was a verdict. The Urals created a regional pen, but the central Pangaean range locked the global gate, trapping everything inside a high-pressure zone of increasing aridity and dwindling resources, with no viable escape route. The hostile geography of Permian Russia acted as a brutal filter, creating an environment too harsh for most life forms. But for one group of predators, this isolation was not a prison, it was an empire. This was the domain of the Gorgonopsids. While strangely rare across most of Pangaea, they achieved absolute dominance here, becoming the ultimate biological expression of this high-pressure system. These were not mammals, but non-mammalian synapsids, distant cousins to our own ancestors. Their critical innovation, and the key to their reign, was a revolutionary weapon system. They were the planet's first true saber-toothed predators. This adaptation allowed them to efficiently hunt the large, armored herbivores that defined the Permian landscape. Their empire was effectively a duopoly, concentrated in the isolated crucibles of Permian Russia and what is now South Africa. Elsewhere, they were marginal players, but in these trapped ecosystems, they were the undisputed masters of the terrestrial food web. The Gorgonopsid dynasty was not monolithic, it was a spectrum of lethality that saturated every predatory niche. At the lower end were hunters like Viatkagorgon, agile predators the size of a large dog, perfectly adapted for smaller prey. But the family scaled up dramatically. At the apex stood Inostrancevia, a monster reaching up to 3.5 meters long and weighing as much as a polar bear. With a skull larger than a human torso, it was the largest terrestrial carnivore of its time. This size diversity demonstrates a total system takeover, with a single predator clade controlling everything from mid-level to apex roles. Their method of killing was as brutal as the environment that forged them. Unlike the precise, neck-severing bites of later saber-toothed cats, paleontologists believe Gorgonopsids employed a strategy of attrition. They would deliver a single, devastating bite with their massive, durable canines and then retreat, waiting for the victim to weaken from shock and massive blood loss. This bleeding out tactic was more than just a hunting strategy, it was a perfect biological metaphor for the entire ecosystem. In a world of dwindling resources and inescapable pressure, survival was a slow drain. The Gorgonopsids did not just kill their prey, they mirrored the slow, attritional death of the environment itself. The Gorgonopsid empire was absolute, but not uncontested. A rival dynasty of predators, the Theosophalians, was rapidly rising, representing not just a competitor but an evolutionary iteration on the same predatory model. Meanwhile, a completely different predatory system was mastering the region's waterways, demonstrating an alternative pathway to dominance through niche partitioning. This was not a one-predator show, it was a complex arms race on multiple fronts. As fellow synapsids, Theosophalians possessed more advanced features than Gorgonopsids, including skulls with larger temporal openings that allowed for more powerful jaw muscles. This evolutionary edge culminated in predators like Megawitzia, a beast reaching the size of a Siberian tiger. Its true innovation, however, may have been chemical. Fossilized skulls show distinct channels running along the roots of its massive canines, strong evidence for a venom delivery system. This would make it one of the largest venomous land animals ever known, a predator armed with both overwhelming physical force and a biological failsafe. For any prey seeking refuge from this terrestrial conflict, the rivers offered no sanctuary. These freshwater systems were ruled by their own apex predators. The Archegosauria were massive amphibians that converged on a crocodilian lifestyle, becoming copycat crocs that used ambush tactics to drag prey into the water. Even more robust were the Chroniosuchidae, reptile-like amphibians armored with protective osteoderms along their backs. Genera like Bystroiena were nearly 3 meters long, functioning as apex aquatic hunters that gripped victims with conical teeth and pulled them to their doom. These alternative strategies reveal the intense selective pressures of Permian Russia. Theosophalians thrived by directly challenging the Gorgonopsids, innovating with superior mechanics and novel weapons. The aquatic predators found success by exploiting an entirely different environment, safe from terrestrial competition. The ecosystem was not a simple food chain, it was a multi-front war where survival demanded either out-evolving the competition or finding a new domain to conquer. The brutal calculus of fang and claw, of venom and armor, defined life in Permian Russia. But this entire biological arms race was a sideshow. The ultimate arbiter of survival was not an organism but a geological time bomb ticking deep beneath the Siberian crust. Every evolutionary advantage gained by Gorgonopsids or Theosophalians was rendered meaningless by a force that operated on a planetary scale, a systemic threat that would invalidate the very rules of life itself. This threat was the Siberian Traps, a large igneous province that began to erupt approximately 252 million years ago. This was not a singular volcanic cone, but a vast fissure in the Earth's crust that bled magma across the continent. Over hundreds of thousands of years, successive waves of flood basalts poured out, eventually burying an area of over 7 million square kilometers, a region larger than Australia, under kilometers of molten rock. The immediate regional effect was total annihilation. The hyper-competitive ecosystem was sterilized, incinerated by lava flows and choked by superheated clouds of toxic gas. The entire landscape, once a battleground for apex predators, was transformed into a lifeless, volcanic wasteland. The Siberian Traps did not remain a regional catastrophe. The sheer volume of volcanic gas injected into the atmosphere initiated a global system failure. Trillions of tons of carbon dioxide and methane triggered a runaway greenhouse effect, causing global temperatures to skyrocket. Acid rain, rich with sulfuric acid, poisoned the land and acidified the oceans, dissolving the shells of marine organisms and collapsing aquatic food webs. As the oceans warmed, they became anoxic, suffocating the life within them. The localized apocalypse in Siberia had become the trigger for the Great Dying, the most profound extinction event in Earth's history. This is the final verdict on the Permian Russian corridor. The region was not just a crucible for biological warfare, it was the epicenter of a planetary reset. The intense predatory pressure was the qualifying round, but the Siberian Traps eruption was the final, unwinnable exam. It proved that in this uniquely volatile geography, the greatest threat was not the predator you could see, but the geological instability you could not. This event established the ultimate baseline for survival in the region, the ability to endure not just a competitor, but the complete failure of the world itself. The history of Permian Russia is a stark transition from biological to geological threat. The brutal reign of apex predators was merely a prelude to a greater test, the Siberian Traps. This eruption didn't just kill the monsters, it erased the world they ruled, replacing a complex ecosystem with planetary-scale extinction. This event established the ultimate baseline for survival in this territory. It proved that the region's defining characteristic is not the ferocity of its inhabitants, but its capacity for complete systemic collapse, a legacy of volatility that defines its deep history and sets the stage for all that followed.